What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Call the Damn Leads, the show by sales professionals for sales professionals. I'm your host, Drew B. Wilson, with more than 2 decades in the sales game. I've seen it, been through it, heard about it. Now I'm bringing it to you, my favorite people in the world, the sales community, because, let's just be honest, sales is the greatest job on the planet. It literally gives us the opportunity to live any life that we want, no matter where we come from, what background, what history we've had. You can use sales to change your life. This guy, the guest today, man, he is someone I've literally watched do some pretty wild and crazy shit. He's also got a shirt on that you can't see unless you're watching the video that says podcasts suck. If you don't have one, he's my friend, Sebastian Rusk. What's up, bro?
Drew B. Wilson, what's up, my brother? Great to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you being here. This is going to be a fun episode. I know we were riffing before we got started, but I want to jump right into this thing, man. I want to know, what's your craziest sales story?
I think it's my very first sales story ever. And I didn't know the world of sales existed until I found the world of sales. I think that's kind of how it works. You're like, wow, this is different. This is cool. I can sell, and then I can make money doing this. So I was a young, I think it was, fresh out of high school, 18, 19. I'm like, I'm not going to college. There's a better way. And I had moved to Tampa, Florida, and I was going kind of job to job. I was working at a photo shop. Remember those? You're printing photos and whatnot. I worked at a photo shop. I worked at a Chinese buffet, you name it. I was just kind of bouncing around. At the time, my rent was $250, so you could bounce around like that. It was kind of easy. And I remember going through the one ads and looking like what's available. And I saw, and this was back in the day, I'm dating myself here with the want ads, but back in the day, for those of you youngsters that may be tuning in, we used to pick up a newspaper, like those things they sell in like stands and grocery stores. And we used to go to what were called the classifieds, and under the classifieds were want ads and help wanted ads. And those were the job postings. And I saw a job post that said free beer and rock and roll atmosphere. And I was like, make 500 plus per week. I'm like, this sounds fantastic. So I called the phone number, because back in the day you had to actually call and inquire about the job and fax over your resume. And they said, hey, when would you like to come in? And I said, I can come in tomorrow. They go, cool, we'll see you at 10 a.m. So I make my way over to this office park in Tampa, Florida. And I'm like, nice office park. It's one of those deals where the office is in the front and there's a warehouse in the back. And I get there and I walk in, and there's a cute little receptionist there, and the Beastie Boys are playing, and it's like a cool type of like environment. And she comes in and she gives me a clipboard with an application, and she said, go ahead and fill this out, and someone will be with you momentarily. And I said, not a problem. So I filled everything out. I gave it back to her. I'm all excited. I'm like, and when you first get into the world of sales and your first experience into the sales job, when you get in here, you're like, wow, this is like a real job. Like, it's a real office with the receptionist, and like, I'm going to get a salary and like maybe commission. I don't even know what that means, but like, man, mama's going to be proud. And this guy comes barreling out of the office right next to the receptionist, and he's about 6'2", gigantic build. And he walks up to me and he says, how you doing? My name's Mitz Matola. Welcome to Jam Designs. Come on in. This guy from New Jersey, clearly big, huge. He sits down. I said, Mitz, that's an interesting name. He said, yeah, they call me Mitz because I got big, gigantic hands like a baseball mitt. His real name was Joe. And I sat down. He said, what kind of money do you want to make? And I said, I don't know, $500 a week. That's it? He said, well, let me listen. Let me give you an understanding of what we got going on here. Okay. We're a wholesale art distribution company. Okay. We buy lithographs framed up in glass, Monet's, Picasso's, Van Gogh's, you name it. And we sell them door to door. Okay. So we come here every single morning. It's a group environment, team environment. We come here every morning. We load up our cars. We have a morning meeting. We do all kinds of crazy, juice chant and get everybody all fired up in the whole nine. And then we go out into the field from 8 a.m. until 5 p.m. We sell as many pictures as we possibly can. And I said, this sounds great, but I don't have a car. And he said, well, that could be a problem. Now, we're going to train you for the first week anyway. We're going to send you out with a manager. The goal of this position is for you to start as a sales rep, get out there, hit your goals, become an assistant manager to manager to actually opening your own branch. And I'm like, wow, that sounds fantastic. So I went out. And I said, well, this sounds great, but I don't have a car. He goes, we'll figure it out. For now, I want you to go out with one of my top reps and learn the ropes. You'll mirror him and watch him the whole nine. And I did just that the first couple of days. I got out. I went with a guy named Doug. I forget what Doug's last name was, but it was a memorable name. I'll remember it in a minute here. And he was just like a happy-go-lucky, like mid-40s, like raging, functioning alcoholic. But man, he could sell the ever-living daylights out of artwork. And he was a clean-cut guy. He packed his lunch every day. He had his territory, and everybody kind of claimed their territory. And he would love to go from Tampa all the way down to Sarasota, Florida. That was our very first trip, and I'll never forget that. And he said, what we do is when we're going to get off of this exit, you pick one street, okay? And that's your territory for the day. And you don't skip any doors at all. You start at the beginning of the street, and you go as far down the street either till it ends or it's the end of the day, and you hit every single location. 7-Elevens, office buildings, schools, apartment buildings, office buildings, condo buildings. There's a door, there's a customer behind that door, and there's a customer with money behind that door, and they need artwork. So I just followed this guy around all day, and I'm thinking, you know what? So the pitch was pretty simple. You load up 30 pictures every day. You had a nice variety of Monets, Van Goghs, Picassos, Salvador Dali's. And I would grab two, and I would out of my trunk, and then I would walk up to your office, and I wouldn't knock, and I wouldn't ask permission. I would just barge right in, and I go, hey, sorry to bother you. My boss just sent me over. We're clearing out our warehouse up the street. I got these big framed pieces of artwork, Monets, Van Goghs, Picassos, got a couple of velvet, Elvis is weeping too. Come on, ladies, grab your cigarettes and checkbooks. I'll meet you downstairs. And I would rinse and repeat that process of being able to go, and you just go and you rinse and repeat that until you fucking sell out. The idea was to sell 20 pictures a day. That was the goal every day. You were a superstar if you were selling 30. I made $5 a picture. So back in 1999, 2000, making $100 a day, pretty good living for a first job on there. Cash money as well, too. I started to mirror Doug for a little while. And then after that, I started to, okay, you go try some doors. And then by like the third day, I was like, all right, out of the way, Doug, let me handle this. So I went back to Mitz and I said, Mitz, he's like, how's it going? Your 3-day training? And I said, things are going great, but I could do this, Mitz, but I don't have a car. He said, so what do you want to do? And I'm like, well, I was on my way here this morning and I saw a car parked on the corner and there was a cardboard sign in it. It was an old Dodge, 1978 Dodge hatchback. And it was $500. And he said, done. Come after work. You and I'll go over there and we'll go grab the car. I'm going to buy you the car. Okay. Guy bought me my first car for $500. I was in this Dodge thing. I load the hatchback up. It looked like a little Volkswagen Golf type deal. It was a Dodge. I don't know what it was. And I loaded all the artwork up on there and I went out there and I started banging the streets and it was great. Then the car died. So I find a Dodge Dart. That thing was a pimp, called it Elmer Fudd, and loaded pictures in the back of that bad boy and the trunk as well. And I would just go around town knocking on doors, getting thrown out of buildings, screamed at by people of like, can you read? Did you see the sign? And I'd be like, sir, in all fairness, do you think I'd be selling door to door if I could read? So that was my very first experience in the world of sales. I did get arrested for soliciting. I didn't leave the building and I went. That was my first experience in the think tank for, the afternoon on there. Mitz came and bailed me out, which was kind of another epic story on there. And the whole idea, they sold you, it was a national company, went to this national convention, and a big hoorah in Atlanta. And the whole idea was to eventually okay, I started in Tampa, but I'm going to go to Houston and open a market in Houston. And you go there and you find an office and they help you get placed and you have your own stuff. We later left the company. My buddy and I got fired, I think. My buddy ended up getting fired. And he called me like 6 months later and was like, hey, man, I found out where to buy the pictures. And I'm buying them for $5 and we can sell them for 20 and make a $15 spread. I can give you $7 or $8 a picture. And I'm like, perfect. He said, well, I'm going to buy all the artwork. Actually, I've already started the company here in Tampa, but I want to move to Fort Lauderdale. And I said, it was right around Thanksgiving. I was living in an efficiency in Clearwater, Florida. And he called me and said, I'm going to take all the rest of the inventory and let's go just hit the fucking road. Because we used to go on road trips for these things too. We're like, hey, we got a bunch of inventory. Let's head to New Orleans for a week, like foreign territory, whatever it may be. So I said, this sounds great. And he goes, well, I'm moving this weekend, like Thanksgiving weekend. I'm like, do you have any room in the U-Haul? I have a little inefficiency. He's like, yeah, I do. He goes, great. I'll be there tomorrow with the U-Haul. We literally took the U-Haul with his apartment, the leftover artwork, and my stuff, and went to Fort Lauderdale Beach, rented 2 hotel rooms on A1A, put artwork in one hotel room, and lived in the other 2 hotel rooms and hit the streets of Fort Lauderdale. And I would move back to Fort Lauderdale meet my daughter's mother. We closed the artwork company, and the rest is history. And I had a kid right after that whole process. But the beginning of sales led me into the world of sales, really cutting your teeth in that world, but also would forever change the trajectory of my life, because after that artwork deal, I ended up getting a job, and my assistant at the time was my baby mama, or became my baby mama. And then later on, I raised a kid and then moved to Chicago to California, sales job to sales job to sales job. But that was probably the most memorable. I reconnected with Mitz. He lives in New Jersey now. I don't know that he's in the artwork business anymore. He's doing something. We caught up a couple of years back on here, but needless to say, I've went running by him going 100 miles an hour as far as I can tell. But it was funny because he was my fucking hero at one point.
Man, you know what though? I want to. First of all, that's an epic story. One of the best in the series so far. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. There's so much to that I love, and we can unpack here because first thing right off the rip, 99% of us fell into sales. Like, we didn't plan on being in sales. We didn't really want to be in sales. Me personally, I used to have like this thing where I hated salespeople. And maybe it was just like that weird self-loathing that all of us salespeople have and go through, because it's like, I'm the fucking worst. I'm the best. I'm the best there is. You can't stop me. Right? That's the up and down of sales. But what I really loved and appreciated about all of that was just your diehard commitment to just being like, I'm going to go do it. Like, okay, cool. Let's go do this. This is an opportunity for me to make some money and do something. Let's get after it.
And I hated it, man. I hated it. I still hate sales. I mean, it's a lot better when you have your own business and it's your own. Well, I will say that. I love sales when it's your own product. When it's your own product and it's your own show and you're the boss, sales is not as bad as it used to be. But when you're walking in, you got some schmuck telling you you're fucking late, and that you're fucking, I mean, I got raised in the school of burn them down and bring them up. So you went in at the end of the day, if you didn't hit your goal, you would get your ass ripped wide open, and they would tell you are a sack of fucking shit. And by the next morning, they're telling you you're a fucking hero and you can go do it, which does a little bit to the psyche. I don't know that that's that much of a popular strategy anymore. I think Grant Cardone and Andy Elliott may be the only two implementing those strategies these days.
Yeah. I mean,
you're only as good as your last sale, right?
Oh, 100%. And I'll never forget, like, when I left I think it was the cigar shop I got let go from in like 08 or 09. And
for rolling blunts.
Yeah, I mean, there was some extracurriculars at the time, but we won't talk about that. That's different. They didn't give a shit that I smoked the blunts. It was just that, I was selling too much product, and then the tax man caught on, because apparently you can't sell a lot of tobacco without paying taxes on it. They don't take kindly to that. So
yeah, imagine that.
I'll never forget, I went to like a recruiting thing one time from the want ads. Like you, I'm a little dated. I went to the want ads, was like, all right, who's hiring? What's available? Let's go take a look at this. I showed up at an interview, and it was one of those situations where I showed up early and they all came pouring out of a conference room dressed to the nines, like suits. All the women wearing nice fancy blouses, and everybody had nice, clean, shiny shoes. And I was there in my polos and like a fucking khaki or something, khakis and like a polo, because I don't really dress up as it is. And I remember looking at the lady and I was like, ma'am, is this like a suit and tie every day kind of place? She said, oh yeah, we dress for success around here. And I was like, that's wonderful. Can you let John or whoever it was know I'm no longer interested in the position? And I like handed her my clipboard and I walked out, and she was looking at me like, wait, what? What are you talking about? What? Hold on a second, sir. And I started walking out, and the dude came around the corner to get me for the interview, and he was like, what's going on? And I was like, oh, no, I don't wear suit and tie, sir. I appreciate it. And he was like, what? He was so confused. I just walked out. I was like, no, I'm out. I don't want to play this game no more. I'm not doing it.
I played that suit. Yeah, I've done that I've played that game a couple times too. I'm not buying any of that stuff. Like, there is something to be said for looking presentable and not being an absolute slob. And when you have a sales team, there is something to be said where, you know what, we're going to show up and look respectable here. We're not going to look like we just rolled out of bed. But this whole notion where I need a shirt and tie on to sell better, I get it. You dress good, you feel good, you sell good. I understand all of that stuff, but I do that really well in my podcast suck t-shirts, a pair of Jordans as well,
Yeah, well, and I want to talk about that because we mentioned it at the start of the show. It's something that I really love. I mean, I'm in every episode that I'm on, I've got my Call the Damn Lead swag. Anywhere I see you in public, you're rocking. Podcasts suck. So let's talk about branding and sales and how important it is to separate yourself and to really lean in on that brand and that personal brand, especially because I talk about it all the time. People don't buy from logos, they don't buy from corporations, they buy from people. And one of the
Yeah.
things that I've seen you do really well is kind of stand out from the crowd, being your authentic self. You're lively, you're energetic. Some people love you, some people might hate you. I'm one of the ones that love you. And so tell me a little bit about how you really came up with that and how you've leaned in on that personal branding and used it to your success in sales.
To much due credit, I had the unique privilege of meeting a guy by the name of Gary Vaynerchuk back in 2011, 2010. You might have heard of him. Gary was instrumental in me figuring out what would be next for me when I was at a point where I had literally had lost it all and it was time to start all over again. And I had been active with social media, and I had a friend reach out and say, "Hey man, you need to connect with this guy, Gary Vaynerchuk. You guys like have identical like energy levels and personalities." And so I said, I've never heard of the guy before. I can barely pronounce his name. He goes, "You read a book called Crush It, and you should read the book." And I'm like, "Cool, but I'm broke." He goes, "Cool, here's my Audible login. Log in and download the file and upload it to your iPod." And that's exactly what I did. And every morning I would go out and I would start listening to Crush It. And Crush It is still a relevant book. He wrote a follow-up book back in 2018 called Crushing It as a follow-up book. But Crush It, now is the time to cash in on your passion, is still a relevant book today. And that book dropped in 2009. So imagine the attrition rate on that is absolutely unbelievable and still relevant. But the cliff notes from the entire book were get out there and build your personal brand, because like you just mentioned, people buy from you, the actual human being. They do business with your company, but they buy from you. So if you have a business, a brick and mortar business, an online business, whatever it may be, now is the time to start creating content and building a brand based on your passions. And he's famously coined from his Web 2.0 talk in 2008, where he did one of his first keynote talks ever. He was wearing the sweatbands back in the day. And he said, whatever you're into, there's an audience for it. You like Alf? Alf it up, baby. You're a fan of Smurfs? Listen, somebody wants to read about Smurfs. Start blogging about it, talking about it, etc. And that started to resonate with me. So I quickly reached out to Gary, connected with him, and we would go back and forth. He was ridiculously accessible back in these days because nobody knew who he was. So we went back and forth, and then as he continued to grow, he was doing his wine library show at the time. As he continued to grow, he became a little more difficult to get a hold of. And I learned early on that if you want to get around people that are actively growing and going places, but are getting busier and busier, you need to get around their camp. So I got around his personal assistant and started developing a relationship with his second book dropped in 2013. And the book signing was here in Miami, around the corner from my studio, about 5 minutes from here. And I had reached out and said, "Hey, Jay, I would love to get an interview in when you're here for your book signing." And he said, "Sure, we'll make it happen." I didn't hear back from his team immediately. And they reached out like the Sunday before, it was on a Tuesday, and said, "Yeah, Gary will do it." And I'm thinking it's going to be like a hallway flip cam type deal. And I had the video production company reach out to me and say, "Hey man, we've seen your work." Hey, I'm like, "I just got started with Social Buzz TV." He's like, "No, we've seen your stuff with your bow ties, etc. We want to work with you. Let us know, what you got going on." And I'm like, "Cool." I'm like, "What can I do with these guys?" I'm like, "Oh my God, Gary." I'm like, "What are you guys doing Tuesday night?" And they're like, "We're open." I'm like, "Great. Meet me at Books and Books in Coral Gables, because a guy named Gary Vaynerchuk, you don't know who he is, but you will, has his book signing." And they're like, "That's perfect, because we just did Russell Simmons' book signing at that same location last month." And I was like, "Word." So that was the first time I got a chance to meet Gary, and I thought it was going to be a hallway deal. And I had a full-blown production company roll in, and I spent an hour and a half. In fact, we held up the book signing with a room full of people waiting for Gary. And we sat down. I'll send you the interview, and you can put some clips up here on the recap on it. Probably one of the worst interviews I ever did, but we all start somewhere, right? But I went off on a little bit of a tangent with that. But the reason I told that story is that it was very full circle from the time my friend gave me his Audible login to the time I first emailed Gary to, I said, one of the first things I said was, this is a full circle moment from me. We've had several full circle moments since then that I'm eternally grateful for. To your point on when did this whole personal branding thing really start to become real? One of the first things he taught me was, he said, "Sebastian, your personal brand in perpetuity is your reputation." And I never, ever, ever forgot that. And another thing that he said in conjunction with that is that authenticity trumps likability any day of the week. Okay. Because people can pick up and read your authenticity. people start to like you and can dislike you, like the wind blows, but authenticity is undeniable. And having spent quality one-on-one time with Gary and knowing him as a human being is one of the most humble. And my sister always says, there's some people that just, when you're talking to them, they make you feel like you're the only person in the room. And I said, Gary Vaynerchuk is one of those human beings. He really is. And those sentiments are echoed from other people as well. But the personal brand things, you see how he continues to go and double down, with the personal branding. Podcast puffs. These just showed up yesterday, actually. These dropped in 2018 as like a promo for the Gary V experience when they dropped on here. And now I've gone all in with his V Friends community. I believe it's the very early stages. His predictions have been incredible. But fortunately, I got a couple boxes here. He signed them and it got him here. But these things are going for, $200+ for a box of stale cereal signed by Gary. But this was 5 years ago that these were relevant on here. But I'm all in on what he's doing with V Friends, which is started off as an NFT collection, still is Series 1 and Series 2, and has been parlayed now into a full-blown IP. His toys right here, you see back here, Grateful Gorilla, Gratitude Gorilla, sold in Macy's everywhere.
People will buy it. If they know you, they'll buy it.
That's exactly it. And I'm all in. I've probably dropped $3,000 on V-Friends collections and cards. And my collection's probably worth well over $2,500 with some of the one-on-ones. I wanted to get into the trading card business as it was anyway, just as a hobby. And it's very lucrative and I've been able to do that with Gary and V-Friends because it's very early on. But I'm doing it, number one, because of my existing relationship with Gary, even though I haven't personally talked to him outside of tweets in several years. My relationship is anchored in there. I always say, if you run into Gary Vaynerchuk and say, I'm a friend of Sebastian Rusk, he's going to stop, and he always stops anyway and gives everybody time. But he'll recognize and respect the relationship that is there, that's been built over the past. He always says, I know this guy a long time. Because everybody, when you become a worldwide phenomenon, everybody knows you, or they think that they know you. You know what I mean? But his personal branding is what helped me develop my personal branding on here. And it's always evolving, Drewby. I'm getting sick of these T-shirts. You know why? Because I've told myself, how many times has someone seen that T-shirt and called you and hired you? Not a lot. It just hasn't happened a lot. How many people have scanned the QR code in the back and booked a call? Not a ton. And I get kind of bored with the look. So now I'm starting to move into, okay, what's next for this? I have some hats. I think you might have one. If you don't, I need to change all that.
You need to send me one. I don't have the hat yet.
You definitely do. I definitely do. I had a couple prototypes that I had, but I still have a couple that I can definitely get you. But I have the hats, but I've been into this. My best friend's a country club member. So been hanging at the country club lately, which is a great place to hang, by the way. Great place to hang, by the way. I feel like the only problem is I leave there feeling broke as fuck, but it's dress code required. Same thing if you go play golf. I can't walk in there with my podcast suck shirt on. It's just not how one in Rome, right? So I found these badass polos some good badass polos with great collars, and I started rocking those. And I also enjoy a good solid like funky blazer every now and then with a pair of J's. So I may be rocking the hat, or maybe I'll work some pins on, or on for my blazer, or like you said, maybe get some polos with the brand. I did the polos for a long time too. Got kind of bored with those, but these, I'm mixing the look up because I think a personal brand is always evolving. But I think a personal brand is what people associate you with.
Yes.
When they think about you. When they think podcasting, they think Sebastian Rusk. And dude, people that associate me with podcasting that are not really in the business world or in my business world, I'm talking people from high school. I'm talking my mom's friends. I posted a post yesterday, which was tough for me to post because it wasn't me trying to get kudos from people. But I said, what kind of positive impact have I made in your life? And I had tons of people say just incredibly kind things, and a lot of it had to do with podcasting. It had to do with my energy level. It had to do with my humor and my comedy. But the core was you remind me how important podcasting is. You remind me that I need to launch a show. You've helped me go from I can't do it to do it. So I think at its core, personal branding is what people remember you for when they see you. Everywhere you're at, it's podcast guy, podcast. And I never had my thing. And I tell this story a lot. I never had my thing. And when I I was the MC for digital marketers traffic conversions for 4 or 5 years. I had a long run with them. Great run. Opened up a lot of doors for me. Led me to MC retirement, but it was a great run. But I would always leave frustrated when I left traffic and conversions. The largest marketing event on the planet with real marketers there. It's 3 days. It's fully immersive. San Diego. This year was in Vegas. Everyone has their thing. So digital marketer focuses on products and source resources for marketers on how to become better marketers. So marketers, 10,000 marketers show up to become better marketers at TNC. Mm-hmm. And it was great to do that show and be on stage with 10,000 people. And all of that was fantastic. But everybody had their thing. And I would always go home with a deflated balloon of like, the whole week, the balloon's full, and as the end, I untie the balloon, the air goes out of it, and it's back to Miami for my social media agency. Yay. Like, what's your thing? Oh, I help people with social media. Oh, you too? My personal brand was important to me, but my business had to sustain that personal brand. You know what I mean? So I had to figure it out. So in 2016, I had to reinvent, and that's exactly what I did.
You know, and the thing about it, one of my favorite quotes of all time comes from Jeff Bezos, and it's, your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And it's exactly like you said, when you honed in on that message and you got very dialed in on like, this is who I am, this is what I'm about, this is what I offer, this is how I help, this is my thing, it ended up creating that compounding effect that like over time, now that's just what people know you as. And really, even if someone reached out to you for that thing, they may have some totally unrelated question, but like, hey, here's a guy that I can know, like, and trust because I know of his brand. I like him because I've seen him online. I've seen him through social media, and I trust because other people that have talked about him when he's not around said good things. And Correct. That's why the personal brand is so important. And if you're
that's why it's key.
That's what's key, right? It's those referrals. It's those people who will vouch for you when you're not around that allow you to compound and to truly grow. And that's the biggest thing that I wanted to get out of all of that for the listener, because those are all great stories, but everything that you mentioned all comes back to, hey, you were willing to say those good things about people when they're not around, which makes all of us now trust them that much more. And that's it. Because if I got on a call with one of those guys, I go, oh, okay, well, I mean, Sebastian was like, yeah, you definitely need to talk to him. So here we are.
Well, yeah, a strong personal brand takes strangers and turns them into instant raving fans. And I use the word instant very strongly. Like it does. I'll use an example. One of our most recent shows we're launching right now is Derek Skubish. He's a roof restoration guy based out of Chicago. And he posted looking for someone to help me out with my podcast studio or hook up my podcast equipment. It wasn't if I'm looking for somebody to help me with a podcast to set up my podcast. So I immediately start getting bombarded with tags in this guy's post. And I don't know him from Adam at all. But Adam McChesney, speaking of Adams, was the first one to tag me in that post. And Derek called me last week and he was like, man, like I've been doing my homework on you. Like, and we're already knee deep. We're getting ready to launch next week. But he's like, dude, like, you're the man. I go, I don't know about that, man. I'm just doing my thing, trying to make my mama proud. He's like, no. Like, you're on stages, like you're creating content, like you are the go-to for podcasting. And you're the reason I hired you. I swear there was like 15 people that tagged you on that post. And I thought to myself, I don't know this guy, but he's the obvious choice. And now we have a relationship and we got great rapport. And I call you whenever I need to. And we're getting ready to launch the show next week. And I thought to myself, man, what a humbling conversation and a humbling thing to be. I am humbled. I came from nothing. I literally built this thing from nothing at all. There is zero ego attached at all. All I have available is what I know and what I continue to do and how I choose to continue to show up. But I think that and it's the gift that keeps giving. Your personal brand. It only gets better as it continues to get stronger and stronger, and you become more edified and more edified. And I don't care who's starting a podcast company. I don't care what competition. I have no competition. And people go, what? That's a pretty bold statement. Yeah. What do you mean by that? I said, I don't have any competition because there's only one Sebastian Rusk that I know of that's helping folks go from idea to iTunes in 9 days or less by launching a podcast. So when I say, is there competition? Not at all, because there ain't no other Sebastian Rusk that I know about out there. So the blinders are on. People say, what other companies or examples? I launched a YouTube campaign couple weeks ago, and they were asking me about some of my competitors. I had to rack my fucking brain. I'm like, I don't know. I literally don't know. I don't know.
I love that shit. That's, and it's funny because I love how we can chuckle about personal branding because we've been in this, as you said, you're a 20-year veteran at this point, like we've been in the game so long that we've experienced it and we can laugh about it. But if you're here with us and you haven't found your brand or you haven't found your niche yet, understand that this is not something that happens overnight. It is something that happens as you get around people and you develop and you learn and you grow and you find there are things that people mention about you when you're not around. And those are the things that I want you to focus on. What are the things that people are saying? Hey, you're great at this thing. You're great at, like, listen to that because it's not for nothing. People these days, they don't just gas you up for no reason unless they're like scumbags. And I'm going to be honest, if you're here on this show, you don't hang out with scumbags. So, like, lean in on those things. And it's funny too, you had mentioned, Gary and the whole crushing it thing. Would you believe that crush the day before it crushes you, me talking about like crushing the day? I didn't even know Gary had written that book until I put mine out and had the podcast started. And then I was like, damn, me and Gary, we on the same vibe, man. That's dope. I like that. And it's like funny enough, but when you're in this ecosphere and you're doing these things and you're thinking about branding, it's so important to really hone in on what it is that brings you joy. What are the things that people say about you when you're not in the room, and just go all in on that and just be that person. Be the guy that knows everything there is to know about your topic, your product, your service, all of that, because that's what's going to allow you to be the go-to person and be the authority, just like my boy Sebastian here. So, Sebastian, man, we've been running. This time flies on these. Go ahead.
It does. It does. I want to add one thing to that. Listen, none of this is going to happen and none of this is going to take place unless you actually get started and do something. Unless you actually make a decision to get like, well, I don't know what I want to do. Listen, it's not your job. Okay. It is your responsibility to figure it out. I'll never forget Sean Whalen walking on stage 2 years ago in Dallas. And one of the first things he said was, what the fuck do you want to do? And he said it again. What the fuck do you want to do? Go do that. Go. And that was it. And it was so simple. And I never forgot that. And I had spent some time with Sean last year and in a casual environment, had a chance to kind of download that whole thought process and have him elaborate a little bit more on that. And he shared his story about just, one day to the next, just leaving his business. He's like, I literally never went back to that office, left my marriage and went into the wilderness for 2 years and just fucking figured it out. And I'm like, but it's about deciding what you want to go and do and going and doing it. Now, if you already know what you're supposed to be doing and you're not doing it, you are being grossly negligent to those individuals that are able to consume what you're doing. I was asked a question 14 years ago that rocked me to my core, and I never forgot it, and I often use it very frequently now in the talks that I get the opportunity to give. And that question I was posed was, who's missing out because you're not showing up? And when you start to think about that, and you start to use that on a daily basis, because guess what? I'm here to tell you right now, I use that on a daily basis. Because guess what? Most days, I don't fucking feel like it. I don't feel like the gym. I don't feel like the calls. I don't feel like nada. I want to hang. That's what I like to do. I like to hang. That's what I like to do. But I also like to make money. And you can't hang and make money at the same time until you've actually gotten to a point where you've built something sustainable that actually works. So I just want a quick reminder. I don't know what to do. You fucking know. If you don't know, it's your job to figure it out, okay? I don't know is no longer acceptable. It's 2024. We live in a world of resources, an abundance of resources readily available. It's your job to just figure it out. Maybe you just want to sit in your house with nothing on, no devices, in complete silence, and just think. I know that's terrifying for some people, but just think. And whatever you get that funny feeling in your gut and you can't stop thinking about it, that's your thing. And it's your responsibility to get out there and do something about it. The world's going to be a better place for it, but most importantly, your life's going to be a better place for it. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Shoo, that's it. I was going to ask like some advice for the newbies, but you just laid it out on them. I don't think there's any better way to really remind them that the most important thing from all of this is to go and do the work. Because if you don't do the work, you'll never get the results. So, Sebastian, man, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you. It is always a pleasure getting a chance to hang out and shoot the shit with you. If
We're
someone
hanging out
heard
next week
this-
too, man.
Oh, I know. We're going to be doing this. I wish this episode was coming out sooner. We'll get to talk about how badass the event is that we're doing next week in St. Louis. But if y'all are hearing this and you want to see what it was about, Sebastian, what's the best way for them to come and find you on social media? If they like the show and they want to share it and tag us, how can they tag you? How can they find you? How can they learn more about podcasts and not sucking?
So if you're thinking about starting a podcast, you're like, oh my God, I want to have a conversation with this guy. I've been thinking about a podcast. I don't know where to start, and I don't want to do the work. I would be more than happy to hop on a call with you and chat about what's possible. You can go to podcastlaunchlabnow.com. That's podcastlaunchlabnow.com. Julie will include that in the show notes of this episode, as well as in any social post that you see on here. Find me on, I hang out on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and on Instagram mainly. Shoot me a DM. Let me know you saw me on Drewby's show. And again, I'll spend 10, 15 minutes with anybody and chat about what's possible. But I'm also going to challenge your thought process on what you think may or may not be possible when it comes to starting a podcast, because I firmly believe that podcasting will change your life and your business if you let it.
You know what? I'm going to add one more to it here, because this one was hit by my mother-in-law. She hit me with this one when I thought about quitting my podcast. Because, if you're going to start one, don't start one and then give up 5 or 6 episodes in. I think that's the average, right? It's like 7 episodes and most people quit. So if you're going to start, don't quit.
Give it 15 months.
But here's what I also, my mother-in-law hit me with this one. She says, how wonderful, Drewby, that your 8-year-old son now has 900 plus episodes of your wisdom, knowledge, and your voice that he can go back and listen to at any time, God forbid something were to happen to you. So for those of you that are out here spouting off about your legacy and how you're doing this for your future generations, let the podcast be your audible version of your life and your wisdom for them, because that's how you truly make an impact for the future. Make sure you hit up my man, Sebastian. Make sure you share this on social media. Tag us at Call the Damn Leads. Find Sebastian. What's your tag, Sebastian?
Podcast Suck.
At Podcast Suck. Make sure you tag at Call the Damn Leads, at Podcast Suck. Go follow Sebastian. Make sure you tune in, subscribe, leave us a review, all the things that go along with this show. But more importantly, if you have an awesome sales story, if you want to join us and share, and you want to tell the world how they can go and live a cool, fun life just like Sebastian, I need you to go to callthedamnleads.com/podcast. Send me your information. Let's set up a time to chat. I'd love to have you on the show. As always, it's been a blast. We'll see you on the next one. Go call the damn leads. We'll talk to you soon.